The transport ship shook as it entered the atmosphere of. Inside the holding cell, a 12-year-old boy named pressed his small hands against the cold metal wall to keep himself steady. His wrists were bound with energy cuffs that hummed softly against his skin. Through the tiny window, he could see clouds the color of rust and poison swirling around the ship. He had not cried when they took him. He had not cried when they told him his father was dead. He had not cried when they dragged his mother away and he heard her screaming his name until her voice faded into silence. Had learned very young that crying did not help. It only made the people who hurt you feel more powerful. The door to his cell slid open. 2 Helix guards entered first, their gray skin and 4 arms making them look like living statues. Behind them came Elder Vox, the leader of the Helix Collective. Vox was tall and thin, with eyes that had no whites, only endless black with small points of light like distant stars. He looked down at the way someone might look at an insect. "The human child," Vox said. His voice was soft and cold. "Do you know why you are here?" Met his eyes without flinching. "Because I was born." Vox tilted his head slightly. "Correct. You were born human. Your parents hid among us for many years, pretending to be refugees from a destroyed world. They lied, they bred, and now we must deal with the result of their deception." "My father did nothing wrong," said. "He was a good man, he helped people." "Your father was human," Vox replied. "That is wrong enough. Humans are a corruption species. You adapt too quickly. You breed too fast. You take everything you touch and make it yours. Wherever humans go, other species eventually disappear. We have seen it happen on 40 worlds. We will not let it happen to ours." Wanted to argue, but he knew it would change nothing. The Helix had made up their minds about humans long before he was born. To them, he was not a child. He was a disease that needed to be removed. "We could have killed you," Vox continued. "Many on the council wanted this, but I argued for mercy. You are young. You did not choose to be born human, so instead of death, we offer you exile." "Exile to where?" Vox gestured toward the window. "A Class 7. Nothing sentient has ever survived there for more than 40 solar cycles. The plants are toxic. The water is poison. The creatures that live there exist only to kill and eat. You will be given basic supplies and released onto the surface." Looked out the window again. The clouds had parted slightly, revealing a landscape of black rock and red forests that seemed to move even though there was no wind. It looked like a world that was alive and hungry. "You call this mercy?" asked quietly. "I call it a chance," Vox said. "A small one, but more than you would have if we simply ended your life now. Perhaps you will surprise us. Perhaps humans really are as adaptable as the stories say." He paused, and something that might have been a smile crossed his alien face. "But I doubt it." The ship landed with a heavy thud. The guards pulled to his feet and marched him through the corridors to the exit ramp. At the door, one of them removed his cuffs and handed him a small pack. Inside was a water filter, a knife, a fire starter, and enough food for perhaps 3 days. "Wait," said. "My mother, what happened to her? Is she alive?" Vox had followed them to the exit. He stood behind the guards with his arms folded across his narrow chest. "Your mother escaped during the arrest of your father. We have not found her. Perhaps she is dead. Perhaps she is hiding somewhere, living like the rat she is. Either way, you will never see her again." The ramp lowered. Hot air rushed into the ship, carrying smells that burned his nose and made his eyes water. The sky above was orange and brown, and he could see 2 suns hanging low on the horizon, one large and red, one small and white. "Go," Vox said. "Die well, human child. Die knowing that your species brought this upon itself." Walked down the ramp. His feet touched the black rock and he felt the ground pulse with heat. Behind him, the ramp began to rise. He turned and looked back at Elder Vox one last time. "I will survive," said. His voice was steady. "And one day you will regret this." Vox laughed. It was a dry, clicking sound. Humans always make such promises, they never keep them. The door sealed shut. The ship rose into the poisoned sky and disappeared through the rust-colored clouds. Within moments, the sound of its engines faded completely. Was alone. He stood very still for a long time, looking at the world around him. The red forest was perhaps 100 meters away. The trees were not like any trees he had seen before. They had no leaves, only long branches that ended in what looked like fingers, all of them reaching toward the sky as if begging for something. Between the trees he could see movement, shadows shifting, things watching him. Checked his pack. 3 days of food, maybe 5 if he was careful, a knife that looked sharp but small, a fire starter that would work perhaps 20 times before it died, a water filter that would need to be cleaned constantly or it would clog with the toxins in this world's water. Not much, not nearly enough. But it was something. He started walking toward the forest. He did not know where he was going. He did not have a plan. He only knew that standing still meant death and he was not ready to die. Not yet. Not ever if he could help it. The first night came faster than he expected. The 2 suns fell below the horizon within hours of each other, and darkness swept across the land like a living thing. Found a crevice in the rocks and squeezed himself inside, pulling his pack in after him. He did not light a fire. Fire meant light, and light meant attention, and he did not know yet what kind of attention this world would give him. He listened to the darkness. It was not quiet, far from it. He heard screaming in the distance, sounds that might have been animals dying or might have been animals killing. He heard clicking and scratching and wet, heavy breathing somewhere nearby. He heard wings beating against the air and crashes in the forest as something large moved through the trees. Then suddenly, everything went silent. The screaming stopped, the clicking stopped, even the wind seemed to hold its breath, felt the hair on his arms stand up. Something was wrong, something had changed. He heard it before he saw it, a sound like stones grinding together, footsteps but not normal footsteps. Each one shook the ground slightly, each one came closer. Pressed himself deeper into the crevice, he barely breathed, he made himself as small as possible. Through the gap in the rocks, he saw it pass, a shadow against the darkness, so large that it blocked out the stars. It moved slowly, confidently, like something that had never needed to run from anything in its entire existence. Its body was covered in scales that seemed to drink in what little light remained. Its head swung from side to side, tasting the air. It stopped. His heart nearly stopped with it. The creature turned, slowly, carefully. It lowered its massive head toward the crevice where hid, and then 2 eyes opened, glowing like molten gold, and looked directly at him. Did not move. He did not breathe. He stared into those golden eyes and waited to die. The creature stared back. Seconds passed, minutes, an eternity. Then, without a sound, it turned and walked away. Its footsteps faded into the distance. The normal sounds of the night returned, but quieter now, more afraid. Released his breath. His whole body was shaking. He did not understand why he was still alive. He did not understand why the creature had not killed him. But as he lay in that crevice, waiting for morning, he made a decision. He would not die on this world. He would learn its secrets. He would become strong enough to face whatever came for him. And someday, he would make Elder Vox regret the mercy he had shown. Learned the rules of through pain and hunger and fear. Each day taught him something new. Each mistake nearly killed him. But he did not die. He adapted. In the first week, he learned about the blue moss. It grew everywhere on the rocks near water, soft and beautiful in a world that held no other beauty. He touched it without thinking, and his hand burned as if he had put it into fire. The pain lasted for 3 days. His skin peeled away in sheets. After that, he avoided anything blue. He learned about the water in the second week. The rivers and streams looked clean and clear, but drinking from them without filtering would kill within hours. He found this out by watching another creature drink. It was a small thing about the size of a dog with 6 legs and fur the color of dried blood. It drank deeply from a stream. Within minutes, it was convulsing on the ground. Within an hour, it was dead. Used his filter religiously after that. He learned about the silent hours in the third week. Every day, just before dawn, the entire world went quiet. No birds sang. No insects clicked. Nothing moved. Learned that this was the hunting time for the worst predators on the planet. Anything that made noise during the silent hours died quickly. He learned to wake before dawn, find a hiding spot, and wait without moving until the two suns rose. The food in his pack ran out after 4 days. After that, he had to hunt. This was the hardest lesson of all. The creatures were fast and vicious. Even the small ones had claws and teeth that could open his throat. Set traps using vines and sharp rocks. Most of them failed, but sometimes one worked and he would have meat for another day. Through all of this, the creature with golden eyes watched him. Saw it almost every night. It never came close enough to touch. It never made any sound. But it was always there, somewhere in the darkness, its glowing eyes following his movements. At first was terrified. He knew what the creature was. The other animals had shown him. Whenever those golden eyes appeared, everything else ran. Even the large predators, the ones with armor-plated skin and jaws that could bite through stone, fled when they sensed the creature coming. The locals called it many things in their animal languages of growls and clicks, but came to think of it as a thing of darkness and death, the apex predator of an entire world of predators. And for some reason, it had not killed him. Weeks passed, grew thinner then stronger. His body hardened, his senses sharpened. He could smell rain coming hours before it arrived. He could hear the difference between safe silence and dangerous silence. He moved through the red forest like a ghost, leaving no trail, making no sound. But he was still prey, and one day the prey became hunted. The reavers found him on a morning when the fog was thick. They were pack hunters, about the size of wolves but with longer limbs and faces that were mostly mouth. Their skin was pale and stretched tight over visible bones. They made no sound when they moved. They communicated through chemicals in the air that could not sense. He did not know they were there until he was surrounded. There were 7 of them. They emerged from the fog in a perfect circle, cutting off every escape route. Their mouths hung open, revealing rows of teeth that curved backward like hooks. Once those teeth bit into flesh, they would not let go. Drew his knife. He knew it was useless. The blade was barely longer than his hand. Against 7 reavers, he might kill one before the others tore him apart. The pack leader stepped forward. It was larger than the others, and there were old scars across its face. It had survived many hunts. It had killed many things. It looked at with cold, hungry intelligence. Thought about his options. He could fight and die quickly. He could run and die slowly, torn apart from behind. Or he could do something insane. Behind him, deeper in the fog, he felt a familiar presence. Those golden eyes were watching. That was near. Every instinct told him to run away from the apex predator. Every survival lesson he had learned screamed that running toward it was suicide. But the reavers were certain death. There was only probable death. Made his choice. He turned and ran directly toward the golden eyes. The reavers hesitated for half a second, confused by prey that ran toward greater danger. Then they followed, their pale bodies cutting through the fog like knives through water. Ran faster than he had ever run in his life. Branches cut his face. Rocks bruised his feet. He could hear the reavers behind him getting closer with every step. He could feel their breath on his back, could almost feel their teeth reaching for his spine. And then he burst into a clearing, and was there. It was even larger than he remembered. Its body was the size of a small ship, covered in scales that seemed to absorb light. Its legs were thick as tree trunks. Its tail stretched behind it for meters, ending in a cluster of spikes. Its head turned toward, and those golden eyes blazed like small suns. Skidded to a stop. He stood between the reavers and the 2 deadliest things he had encountered on this world. He was going to die. He was certain of it. But the reavers had followed him into the clearing. They had been so focused on their prey that they had not sensed the greater predator until it was too late. The moved had never seen anything so fast. One moment it was still. The next moment it was among the reavers, its jaws closing around two of them at once, its tail sweeping three more off their feet. The pack leader tried to run, but a massive claw pinned it to the ground. The bit down, and the reaver stopped moving. 7 reavers died in less than 10 seconds. Then the clearing was silent. Bodies lay everywhere, torn and broken. Blood soaked into the black rock, and the turned its golden eyes back to. He should have run. Any sane creature would have run, but was too tired to run, too tired to be afraid anymore. He had been afraid every moment since landing on this world. He could not be afraid any longer. So instead of running, he stood still. They approached. Each step shook the ground. Its breath washed over, hot and thick with the smell of blood. It lowered its massive head until its eyes were level with his. Looked into those eyes. He saw intelligence there. Not human intelligence, but something old and deep and patient. This creature had lived for a very long time. It had killed more things than could imagine. It could end his life with a single movement. But it did not. The breathed out a long exhale that blew his hair back from his face. In the language of predators, he understood this meant something. He was being acknowledged, not as prey, not as a threat, as something too small to matter. But did not accept this. He was not too small to matter. He was human. He adapted. He survived. He mattered. Slowly, carefully, he raised his hand. The watched but did not move, stepped forward, closing the distance between them. He could feel the heat radiating from its scales. He could see the scars that covered its body, marks of countless battles won. He placed his hand on its snout. The scales were warm and rough under his palm. The creature went completely still. For a long moment, neither of them moved, felt the creature's breath, felt the pulse of its enormous heart. Then they made a sound. It was low and deep like distant thunder, not a growl, not a threat, something else, something that might have been acknowledgement. Did not remove his hand. He stood there, touching the most dangerous creature on a planet full of dangerous creatures, and he felt something shift in the world around him. He was no longer just prey. He was no longer just a human child abandoned to die. He was something new, something this world had never seen before. And this was only the beginning. The first time brought food to this den, the creature did not understand. It lay in the shadows of its cave near the dormant volcano, watching with golden eyes as the small human dropped a fresh kill at the entrance. The prey was a runner, a fast herbivore that had spent 3 hours tracking. It was good meat, enough to feed him for several days. He left it there and backed away. It did not move. It did not need his offering. It could hunt things 1,000 times larger than this small creature, but was not bringing food because the beast needed it. He was bringing it because that was how you built trust. That was how you became pack. He returned the next day with another kill, and the next, and the next. On the 7th day, they ate what he brought, not because it was hungry, because it understood. Began spending his days near the den. He would sit outside the entrance and talk. He did not know if the creature understood his words, but he spoke anyway. He told it about his life before. He told it about his parents, about his father's kindness and his mother's strength. He told it about the Helix Collective and why they feared humans. He told it about Elder Vox and the cold smile on his face as he sentenced a child to death. They listened. Sometimes it would close its eyes. Sometimes it would watch him without blinking. Sometimes it would make that low, rumbling sound in its chest, the one that had come to recognize as acknowledgement. "You need a name," said one evening, as the 2 suns set and painted the sky in shades of blood and fire. "I cannot keep calling you the creature in my head. You are more than that." The tilted its massive head. Thought for a moment. His father had taught him old words from Earth, the human that had never seen. words from a language called Korean, which had been spoken by their ancestors long ago. Said, "It means sword, because you are sharp and deadly and beautiful." The creature's eyes seemed to glow brighter for a moment. Perhaps it was just the light of the setting suns. Perhaps it was something more. Repeated, "That is your name now." From that day forward, the creature responded to it. Months passed. Learned that did not respond to commands. The creature was not a pet. It was not a tool to be used. But it responded to emotion, to intent. When felt fear, became alert and protective. When felt calm, would rest beside him like a mountain of shadow and scale. When felt grief for his parents and the life he had lost, would press its massive head against his body with a gentleness that seemed impossible for something so large. The bond between them was not the bond between master and servant. It was the bond between equals, partners, pack. His body grew stronger. He was no longer the thin, frightened boy who had been dropped onto this world. His arms were thick with muscle. His legs could carry him for hours without rest. His hands were calloused and from hunting and fighting and surviving. He had learned to move through the red forest without making a sound. He had learned which plants could heal wounds and which could poison enemies. He had learned to read the weather in the color of the clouds and the behavior of the animals. But the greatest thing he had learned was how to fight alongside. The first real test came when a rival entered the territory. It was another apex predator, different from but nearly as large. Its body was covered in thick plates of bone armor. Its head was shaped like a hammer, designed to crush and smash. It had wandered into his hunting grounds and refused to leave. Rose to face the intruder. The two titans circled each other in the clearing, their bodies tense, their eyes locked. The air between them seemed to crackle with violence about to happen. Could have hidden, he could have let fight alone. The creature was powerful enough to win without help, but that was not what Pack did. Pack fought together. He moved around the edge of the clearing, staying low, staying quiet. The armored creature was focused entirely on. It did not see the small human creeping toward its flank. It did not consider the human a threat. That was its mistake. Had prepared for this. Over the past months, he had built weapons from the materials of. He had a spear tipped with the tooth of a predator he had killed. He had a torch made from dried vegetation soaked in flammable sap. He had learned where the armor plates of such creatures did not quite meet, where there were gaps that a blade could find. The armored creature charged at. Their bodies collided with a sound like thunder. His claws scraped against bone armor, leaving gouges but not penetrating. The creature's hammer head swung towards skull. And then struck. He came from behind, running with all his speed. He lit his torch as he ran and thrust it into the gap between two armor plates near the creature's back leg. The fire caught the sensitive flesh beneath. The creature screamed and spun, trying to find this new attacker, but was already moving, already striking again with his spear. The distraction gave the opening it needed. While the armored creature turned to face, lunged forward and bit down on its unprotected throat. The battle was over in seconds. Stood breathing hard, his heart pounding, blood that was not his own splattered across his chest. Turned to look at him. For a moment they simply stared at each other, predator and human, beast and boy. Then lowered its head and made that rumbling sound. Acknowledgement, approval, Pack. 3 years passed on, was no longer 12. He was 15, tall and lean, his body covered in scars that told the story of his survival. His hair had grown long and wild. His eyes had grown hard, but when he looked at, they softened. The creature had grown too, if such a thing was possible. Or perhaps it just seemed larger because knew it better now. He knew every scar on its body, every sound it made, and what each sound meant. He knew that it liked to sleep in the warmth of the volcanic vents during cold nights. He knew that it would not hunt during the rain because its scales became heavy with water. He knew that it purred when he scratched the soft spot behind its massive ears. Slept against its flank now, warmed by the creature's internal heat. He rode on its back when they traveled long distances, holding onto the ridges of its spine as the world blurred past beneath them. He was no longer afraid of this planet. He had become part of it. The world that was meant to kill him had become his home. But home did not mean safe. Knew that the galaxy beyond still existed. He knew that the Helix Collective still ruled over hundreds of systems. He knew that Elder Vox still lived and probably never thought about the human child he had sentenced to death. Sometimes late at night would look up at the stars and wonder about his mother. Was she alive? Was she still hiding somewhere, running from the collective, mourning a son she thought was dead? He hoped she was safe. He hoped she had found peace. But he also hoped that someday, somehow, she would find her way to him. And he hoped that when she did, she would not be disappointed in what her son had become. Because was no longer just a survivor. He was a warrior. He was a partner to the deadliest creature on the deadliest world in known space. He had taken the death sentence of exile and turned it into something else entirely. He had turned it into power. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew that one day the collective would learn what their mercy had created. One day they would come to expecting to find bones. Instead, they would find him. And they would be afraid. The research ship landed on its northern continent on a morning when acid rain was falling in sheets across the landscape. Watched through the viewport as the yellow rain struck the ground and steamed where it hit rock. She had studied for most of her career, but she had never seen one quite like this. Everything here seemed designed to kill. Atmospheric readings are within acceptable limits, said one of her team members, a young male named with gray skin and nervous eyes. We can survive outside with standard protection suits. Then let us begin, said. We have 3 days to collect samples before the collective's patience runs out. She did not say what she was really looking for. The official mission was biological research, collecting samples of unique organisms for study and potential exploitation, but had her own reasons for coming here. 3 years ago, a human child had been exiled to this world. A 12-year-old boy sentenced to die alone on a planet that had killed every sentient creature ever stranded on it. Had been young then, just starting her career, but she remembered the footage of the child being led onto the transport ship. She remembered his eyes, dark and steady, showing no fear. She had never believed it was right. She had studied humans extensively, fascinated by their capacity for adaptation and survival. The collective feared humans because they could not be contained, but wondered if that was something to fear or something to admire. She did not expect to find the boy alive. 3 years on was impossible, but she had to look, she had to know. The team spent 2 days collecting samples without incident. They found new species of toxic plants, cataloged predator movements, and narrowly avoided several attacks from local wildlife. Everything went according to plan. Then they found the bones. Discovered them near a water source, arranged in a pattern that was clearly not natural. Ribs from some large creature had been set up in a circle, sharpened and pointing outward. Inside the circle were the remains of a fire pit. Someone made this, said, his voice shaking. Something intelligent made this. Knelt beside the structure. She examined the bones carefully. They had been cleaned and carved with simple tools. The fire pit showed evidence of repeated use over many months. Check the surrounding area, she said quietly. Look for more signs. They found them everywhere once they knew what to look for. Traps made from vines and stone. Markers carved into trees, perhaps indicating territory or safe paths. A small cave that had been reinforced with bone supports, creating a shelter. Animal skins stretched and dried, ready to be used as clothing or bedding. Someone was living here. Someone intelligent enough to survive where survival was supposed to be impossible. It cannot be the human, said. No human could survive here for 3 days, let alone 3 years. But was not so certain. She had studied humans. She knew what they were capable of. On the 3rd day, they found out. The team was preparing to return to their ship when the Reavers attacked. A pack of 8 emerged from the red forest without warning, their pale bodies moving with terrible speed. Screamed as one of them knocked him to the ground. Another researcher fell, blood spraying from a wound in her throat. Pulled out her weapon and fired. The energy blast caught one Reaver in the chest, but the others kept coming. There were too many. They were too fast. She heard one of her team members die behind her, then another. She turned to run, knowing it was hopeless, knowing she would never reach the ship in time. And then they appeared. It came from the forest like a wave of living darkness, scales black as void, eyes burning gold. On its back, holding onto its spine ridges, was a figure that's mind refused to believe. It was human. A young man, perhaps 15 years old, with long wild hair and skin covered in scars. He wore clothing made from animal hides. In his hand was a spear tipped with something that gleamed like metal. His face was hard and focused, the face of a predator rather than a prey. They crashed into the Reavers. The boy leaped from its back and landed in a roll, coming up with his spear already moving. He moved through the fight like water through rocks, stabbing and slashing with perfect efficiency. They killed 3 Reavers with a single sweep of its tail. The boy killed 2 more before they even knew he was targeting them. Within seconds it was over. The Reavers were dead. They stood among the bodies, breathing heavily, its golden eyes scanning for more threats, and the boy turned to look at. She saw his face clearly for the first time. She saw the intelligence in his eyes, the calculation. She also saw something else, recognition. He knew what she was. He knew where she came from. "You are Helix," he said. His voice was rough, as if he did not use it often. "Yes," said carefully. "My name is I'm a researcher. I mean you no harm." The boy laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "The last time someone from the Helix spoke those words to me, they dropped me on this world to die." Looked at him. Looked at the scars on his body, the weapon in his hand, the massive creature standing behind him like a guardian angel made of shadow and death. "You are," she said softly, "the human child who was exiled." "I was," the boy said. "I do not know what I am now, something new, something your collective did not expect." Glanced at the surviving members of her team. 3 remained alive, including. They were staring at, and though with expressions of pure terror. "We should leave," whispered. "We should run, that creature will kill us all." "No," said, "he saved us. If he wanted us dead, we would be dead already." She stepped toward slowly, keeping her hands visible. "I came here looking for you. I did not believe you could be alive, but I hoped. I have studied your species for many years. I knew the collective was wrong to do what they did to you." Watched her approach but did not move. The rumbled low in its throat, a warning, but made a small gesture and it fell silent. "Why do you care?" asked. "What difference does one human child make to you?" "Because I believe in truth," said. "The collective tells us that humans are dangerous because they are different. But I have seen other species do terrible things, and no one exiles their children too. The collective fears humans because humans can survive what other species cannot. They fear humans because humans are strong." She paused. "And you have just proved them right. You have survived 3 years on the most dangerous planet in known space. You have tamed its deadliest creature. You are exactly what they were afraid you would become." Was silent for a long moment. Behind him, the shifted, its massive body settling into a resting position. It was watching, but there was no threat in its golden eyes. It was waiting to see what its partner would decide. "What happens now?" asked finally. Before could answer, there was a crackling sound from behind her. Had pulled out a communication device. His hands were shaking, but his face was determined. "Command, this is Research Team 7, he said into the device. "We have found the human. He is alive, and he has bonded with a Class 1 apex predator. Repeat, the human is alive and has achieved symbiosis with a native species. Sending visual confirmation now." "No," said, reaching for him. "Stop, you do not understand what you are doing." But it was too late. The message was sent. The footage was transmitted. Within hours it would reach Elder Vox and the Helix Council. They would know that the child they had sentenced to die was not only alive. He had become something more powerful than any of them could have imagined, and knew exactly what they would do next. They would send ships. They would send soldiers. They would come to not to study or explore, but to kill. She looked at the young man who had survived the impossible. "They will come for you now," she said. "The collective, they will not let you live." Smiled. It was a cold smile, the smile of someone who had stopped being afraid long ago. "Let them come," he said. "This is my world now, and I have been waiting for them." Elder Vox watched the footage for the 5th time. His black eyes reflected the image of the human boy riding on the back of a creature that no sentient being had ever survived encountering. The boy's face was calm, confident, powerful. He looked nothing like the frightened child Vox had exiled 3 years ago. "How is this possible?" asked a council member beside him. "Has a 0% survival rate for sentient life beyond 40 cycles. This human has survived over 1,000 cycles." "Because humans are not like other sentient life," Vox said quietly. "That is why we exiled him in the first place. That is why we should have killed him instead." He turned away from the screen. "Prepare the military fleet, full combat strength. We will go to ourselves and correct this mistake." "Elder, is such force necessary? It is only one human." Vox's eyes darkened. One human who has accomplished what no other being in history has accomplished. One human who has tamed death itself. If word of this spreads to other species, if they learn that humans cannot be destroyed by exile too, they will lose their fear of us. Our control over the collective depends on that fear. He straightened his robes. The human dies, the creature dies, and we burn everything he has touched. The fleet departed within 2 days. 12 warships, carrying 500 soldiers trained for hostile environment combat. It was more force than had been used to conquer entire planets. All of it aimed at one boy and one beast. What Vox did not know was that someone else had intercepted his orders. Someone who had spent 3 years searching, hiding, and preparing for exactly this moment. Had survived by becoming invisible. After escaping the arrest that killed her husband and took her son, she had changed her appearance, her name, her identity. She had traveled from system to system, gathering allies among the species who resented Helix control. She had learned to hack collective communication networks. She had learned to pilot ships. She had learned to fight. And she had never stopped looking for her son. When the footage appeared in the collective's communication channels, she had been monitoring. When the military fleet launched, she had been waiting. Now her small ship was racing toward, pushing its engines past their safety limits. She would reach her son before the collective did, or she would die trying. On stood at the edge of the volcanic fields, looking up at the sky. He had sent and her surviving team members away in their research vessel, telling them to flee before the warships arrived. Had argued, wanting to stay, wanting to help, but had refused. "This is my fight," he had said. "You have done enough by believing in me. Now go, tell the galaxy what you have seen here. Tell them what one human can become." Now he was alone waiting for the ships that would come to kill them. The stood beside him, its massive body radiating heat, its golden eyes fixed on the stars above. "They will bring weapons," said softly. "Weapons that can burn us from orbit, weapons that can level mountains." Rumbled in response. The creature did not understand the words, but it understood the intent. Battle was coming. Threat was approaching. "We cannot fight them in the sky," continued. "So we will bring them to the ground. We will make them come to us. And then we will teach them what it means to hunt on a." He spent the next day preparing. He set traps throughout the volcanic fields, using everything he had learned in 3 years of survival. He placed markers that would lead enemies toward the most dangerous areas of. He gathered allies among the other predators of this world, creatures that had learned to tolerate his presence because he had never threatened their territory. When the Helix fleet appeared in the sky, blocking out the suns was ready. The warships descended through the atmosphere like metal mountains. They landed in the volcanic fields, their hulls scorched by the acid in the clouds. Soldiers poured out in neat formations, their weapons ready, their armor sealed against the hostile environment. Elder Vox emerged from the command ship. He was wearing a protective suit that covered his entire body, but recognized him instantly. He would never forget those eyes. "Human," Vox called out, his voice amplified by speakers. "You have survived longer than expected. I acknowledge this, but your survival ends now. Surrender yourself and I will grant you a quick death. Resist and I will make you suffer." Stepped out from behind a rock formation. He was alone, apparently unarmed, wearing only his hide clothing and carrying his spear. 500 soldiers raised their weapons toward him. "Elder Vox," said, his voice carried across the volcanic field clear and strong. "You exiled me to die. Instead, I learned to live. You called this world death. I call it home." He smiled. "You should have killed me when you had the chance." Vox's black eyes narrowed. "Kill him." The soldiers opened fire, but was not there anymore. He had dropped behind the rock formation the instant before the weapons discharged. The energy blast scorched empty ground. And then the world came alive around them. The traps triggered in sequence. Pits opened beneath soldiers' feet, dropping them into pools of toxic water. Rock slides crashed down from above, burying entire squads. The toxic blue moss that had carefully collected and spread across key positions released its burning spores into the air, eating through armor seals. And then the predators came. Reavers poured from the red forest, drawn by the noise and the smell of blood. Other creatures followed, things with armor and claws and teeth, things that had no names because nothing had ever survived long enough to name them. They fell upon the soldiers like waves upon rocks. In the chaos emerged. The exploded from the ground where it had been hiding, buried beneath the volcanic soil. Its scales shed dirt and rock as it rose, its golden eyes blazing, its jaws opening to reveal teeth longer than swords. It crashed into the center of the helix formation like a living earthquake. Rode on its back, spear in hand, striking at every enemy within reach. He was not fighting like a human anymore. He was fighting like itself, wild and deadly and unstoppable. Elder Vox watched his army crumble. He watched soldiers die by the dozens, torn apart by creatures, killed by traps, destroyed by a world that had become a weapon in the hands of one human child. He felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear. He turned to run toward his ship, but a figure blocked his path. She was human, a woman with dark eyes and a face marked by years of hardship. She held a weapon pointed at his chest. "Going somewhere, Elder?" asked. Vox froze. "Who are you?" "I am the mother of the child you tried to murder," said. "I am the wife of the man you killed, and I am the last thing you will ever see if you do not call off your troops right now." Before Vox could respond, the battle ended, not because the Helix soldiers had won, but because they had all died, every one of them. 500 of the collective's finest warriors, destroyed by a boy and a beast. Walked toward his mother, followed behind him, its massive body stained with blood that was not its own. Mother and son looked at each other across the volcanic field, across 3 years of separation and pain and impossible survival. Whispered. Mother replied. She embraced him. He was taller than her now, stronger, covered in scars she did not recognize. But he was still her son. He was still alive. Pulled back and looked at Elder Vox. The Helix leader was on his knees, his protective suit cracked, his black eyes filled with terror. "You could have let me live in peace," said. You could have forgotten about one human child on a distant world, but you came here to kill me. You came here to prove that humans could be erased. He stepped closer. You were wrong. He turned to face the sky, where the Helix warships still hovered. He knew that their communication systems would be broadcasting everything. He knew that the entire collective would be watching. My name is, he said, his voice carrying across and beyond. You exiled me to die, instead I learned to live. You sent an army to destroy me, instead I destroyed them. You fear what humans become when you try to break us. He paused, letting his words sink in. You should. Across the galaxy, on 100 worlds, 1,000 species watched the broadcast. They saw a human boy standing amid the ruins of an army, a monster at his side, a broken elder at his feet. They heard his words. They understood his message. Humans could not be killed by exile. Humans could not be stopped by armies. Humans adapted. Humans overcame, and humans remembered. The Helix Collective from that day. They declared it a permanent quarantine zone, forbidden to all traffic. But the truth had already spread too far to contain. And in the years that followed, when other species spoke of humans, they no longer spoke with contempt. They spoke with respect, and sometimes in quiet moments they spoke with fear. Because somewhere on a boy and his guardian still waited, and they would always be ready if anyone tried to destroy humanity again.